Maya Carter was driving home after a long day at work. She was an intelligent and hard-working woman, proud to serve her country as an FBI agent. It was late in the evening, and the streets were mostly empty. As she drove through a quiet neighborhood, she suddenly noticed flashing blue and red lights behind her. A police car was signaling her to pull over. Maya felt confused. She was sure she hadn't done anything wrong. She checked her speed, perfectly within the limit. Her seatbelt was on. Her car was in perfect condition. Still, she knew the best thing to do was to stay calm and cooperate. She slowly pulled over to the side of the road, rolled down her window, and placed both hands on the steering wheel. A tall female officer, Karen Thompson, stepped out of the police car. Her expression was stern as she walked toward Maya's vehicle. She didn't greet Maya or ask if she was okay. Instead, she immediately demanded license and registration. Now, Maya remained calm and nodded. "Sure, officer. May I ask why you pulled me over?" she asked politely. Karen's eyes narrowed. "I said license and registration," she snapped, ignoring Maya's question. Maya knew her rights. She wasn't going to argue, but she had every right to know why she was being stopped. "I'll give you my information, but I would still like to know the reason for this stop." Karen's face hardened. She didn't like being questioned. "Step out of the car." Maya was shocked. This was not normal. There was no reason for this order. "Officer, I'm not resisting, but can you please tell me what I did wrong?" Karen reached for her radio and muttered something under her breath. Then she looked at Maya again. "I said, step out of the car. Now." At this point, Maya realized something was wrong. She had dealt with difficult situations before, but this felt different. Still, she didn't want to escalate the situation. She slowly unbuckled her seatbelt, opened the car door, and stepped out with her hands visible. Karen immediately grabbed her wrist and pulled her toward the police car. Maya couldn't believe it. She hadn't done anything wrong, yet this officer was treating her like a suspect. "Turn around," Karen ordered. Before Maya could respond, Karen forced her hands behind her back and locked the cold metal handcuffs around her wrists. Maya took a deep breath. "Officer, you are making a huge mistake," she said, still calm but firm. Karen smirked. "Oh, really? We'll see about that." Maya remained silent as Karen led her to the back of the police car. She knew something Karen didn't. This situation was about to take a turn that the officer would never see coming. Maya sat in the back of the police car, her hands cuffed behind her back. The cool metal pressed against her wrists, but she remained calm. She had been in difficult situations before. This was just another challenge. She knew losing her temper wouldn't help. She took a deep breath and looked out the window as Officer Karen Thompson got into the driver's seat. Karen didn't say a word. She seemed satisfied, as if she had just caught a dangerous criminal. Maya wanted to laugh at the irony. If only Karen knew the truth. But Maya decided to stay silent for now. She wanted to see how far this officer would take things. The car pulled into the police station. Karen parked and stepped out, then opened the back door. "Let's go," she said, gripping Maya's arm firmly. Maya didn't resist as she was led inside the station. The other officers barely looked up when they walked in. It seemed like just another routine arrest to them. Karen marched Maya toward the booking desk. A younger officer sitting behind the desk glanced up. "What's the charge?" he asked, looking between Maya and Karen. Karen folded her arms, refusing to cooperate. "Suspicious behavior." The young officer frowned slightly. He looked at Maya, well-dressed, calm, and not at all like someone who had done something wrong. "Do you have an ID?" he asked Maya. Maya nodded. "It's in my jacket pocket." Karen scoffed. "Nice try. You're not getting anything until we finish processing you." She turned to the younger officer. "Just start the paperwork." Maya sighed. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, looking directly at Karen. Karen rolled her eyes. "I don't need advice from a suspect." Maya didn't say anything more. She had given this officer plenty of chances to realize her mistake. It was time for reality to hit. The young officer hesitated for a moment, then shrugged and started typing on his computer. "Name?" he asked. Maya tilted her head slightly. "Maya Carter." The young officer froze. His fingers stopped moving on the keyboard. He slowly lifted his eyes to meet Maya's. Karen sighed impatiently. "What are you waiting for? Just put it in." The young officer swallowed hard and typed the name. A second later, his eyes widened. He quickly looked at Karen, then back at Maya. "Officer Thompson," he started, his voice shaky. "You might want to check her ID." Karen frowned. "Why? Just book her already." The young officer hesitated again, then turned his computer screen slightly toward Karen. Karen's eyes flickered to the screen, and her face instantly paled. Right there, in bold letters, was Maya's full name and title. FBI Special Agent Maya Carter. Maya watched as Karen's confidence vanished. She leaned in slightly and said, "Now, Officer Thompson, do you still want to process me?" Karen's face lost all color as she stared at the screen. For a moment, she didn't move. The room fell silent. The young officer behind the desk swallowed hard, unsure of what to do next. Maya remained calm, her eyes locked on Karen. She had given the officer plenty of chances to realize her mistake. Now it was too late. Karen blinked and straightened her back, trying to regain control. This must be a mistake," she muttered, shaking her head. "There's no way." The young officer quickly checked the system again. "It's not a mistake," he said, his voice now firm. "She's a high-ranking FBI agent, and from what I see here, she has clearance that goes way beyond our department." He glanced at Maya with a look of respect. "Special Agent Carter, I am so sorry about this." Karen took a shaky breath, still refusing to believe what she was seeing. "How was I supposed to know who she was?" she snapped. "She didn't tell me." Maya raised an eyebrow. "I didn't get the chance. You were too busy arresting me for no reason." Her voice was calm, but there was a sharpness to it. Karen opened her mouth to argue, but she had no excuse. The room remained tense as the young officer quickly stood up. "We need to take those handcuffs off," he said, reaching for the keys. Karen hesitated. Her fingers twitched as she held onto her belt. She didn't want to admit she had made a mistake. "Officer Thompson," the young officer said again, more firmly this time, "unlock the cuffs. Now." Karen's jaw clenched, but she finally stepped forward. With shaky hands, she pulled out the key and unlocked Maya's cuffs. The metal clicked, and Maya rubbed her wrists as they came off. She took a deep breath, stretching her arms. "Thank you," she said to the young officer before turning back to Karen. "Now, Officer Thompson, we need to talk." Karen stiffened. "About what?" Maya took a step closer. "About how you handled this situation. About why you thought I was suspicious when I was simply driving home." Karen looked away, but Maya wasn't done. "This isn't just about me," she continued. "How many other people have you treated this way? How many innocent people have been arrested for no reason?" The young officer glanced between them, clearly uncomfortable. He knew Maya was right. Karen crossed her arms, her voice defensive. "I was just doing my job." Maya tilted her head. "Were you? Or were you abusing your power?" Karen didn't answer. Maya took one final breath. "We'll find out soon enough." Karen frowned. "What does that mean?" Maya smiled slightly. "You'll see." Without another word, she turned and walked out of the station. But she wasn't done yet. This was only the beginning. Karen stood frozen as Maya walked out of the station. Her mind was racing. She had made a mistake, a huge one. But she wasn't ready to accept it yet. The other officers in the room were whispering to each other, exchanging uneasy glances. They had never seen something like this happen before. The young officer who had checked Maya's ID finally broke the silence. "Officer Thompson, what do we do now?" Karen didn't answer. Instead, she turned sharply and walked to her desk, her hands shaking slightly. She had to think. Maybe Maya would just let this go. Maybe she wouldn't take things further. But deep down, Karen knew that wasn't true. Meanwhile, Maya stepped outside, inhaling the cool night air. She had handled many tough cases in her career, but this one felt personal. She had seen injustice before, but tonight, she had been the one placed in handcuffs for no reason. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a familiar name flashing on the screen. Agent Daniels. He was her FBI colleague and a close friend. She answered immediately. "Maya, are you okay?" His voice was filled with concern. "I'm fine now," she replied. "But we have a serious problem." Daniel sighed. "I saw the report. They ran your name through the system. The moment that happened, the FBI was alerted." Maya wasn't surprised. Her clearance level was high, and any background check on her would immediately send a notification to federal headquarters. "This isn't the first time something like this has happened, Daniels," she said, "and I'm tired of it. How many more innocent people are going through this? People who don't have an FBI badge to protect them." Daniels was silent for a moment. Then he said, "What are you planning to do?" Maya's eyes darkened with determination. "I'm filing an official complaint. But I won't stop there. I want a full investigation into that officer's record. If she's done this to me, she's done it to others." Daniels exhaled. "You know this is going to get messy, right?" Maya nodded. "I know. But it needs to be done." She ended the call and stared at the police station one last time. She wasn't afraid. She had dealt with criminals far worse than Karen before. But what scared her was the thought of innocent people suffering just because someone with a badge abused their power. Maya turned and walked to her car. She had a long night ahead of her, but she was ready. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about justice, and she wasn't stopping until she got it. The next morning, the entire police station was buzzing with tension. News of what had happened the night before had spread quickly. Some officers whispered in the hallways, while others avoided Karen completely. She walked into the station with her head held high. But inside, she felt uneasy. She had spent all night thinking about what happened. She told herself she had just been doing her job. But deep down, she knew the truth. She had made a mistake. And now, that mistake was coming back to haunt her. Her fears were confirmed when the police chief called her into his office. She knocked on the door and stepped inside. Chief Reynolds, an older man with years of experience, was sitting behind his desk, looking serious. Next to him sat two men in dark suits. Karen's stomach dropped. She knew exactly who they were, FBI investigators. "Officer Thompson, take a seat," Chief Reynolds said, his voice firm. Karen sat down, trying to appear calm. One of the FBI agents, a tall man with sharp eyes, leaned forward. "I assume you know why we're here." Karen nodded but said nothing. "We've received a formal complaint from Special Agent Maya Carter," the agent continued. "She claims you wrongfully detained her without cause. We're launching a full investigation into your actions." Karen's throat went dry. "It was just a misunderstanding," she said quickly. "I didn't know who she was." The second agent, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "That's not the issue, Officer Thompson. The problem is why you arrested her in the first place. According to the report, she asked multiple times why she was being stopped, and you never gave her an answer." Karen shifted in her seat. She was acting suspiciously. The first agent raised an eyebrow. "Suspicious how?" Karen opened her mouth but hesitated. She had no real answer. She had stopped Maya simply because she assumed she was doing something wrong. And now, she had no way to justify it. Chief Reynolds sighed and rubbed his forehead. "This isn't good, Karen. The department is already under pressure from the community. This kind of situation makes things worse." The second agent placed a file on the desk and slid it toward Karen. "We've also started reviewing your past cases, and we found a pattern." Karen's heartbeat sped up. "A pattern?" The agent nodded. You've made several arrests under similar circumstances. People stopped for no clear reason, reports that don't add up, complaints that were ignored. Karen felt her palms sweat. I was just following protocol. The first agent shook his head. No, Officer Thompson. This is not protocol. This is abuse of power. The room fell silent. Karen swallowed hard. She had always thought she could do whatever she wanted without consequences. But now it was clear. This time, she had gone too far. And Maya Carter wasn't going to let it go. Karen sat frozen in her chair. Her mind raced as she looked down at the file in front of her. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. She had always thought she was untouchable, that her actions would never be questioned. But now the FBI was digging into her past, and she had no way to escape it. Chief Reynolds leaned forward, his expression serious. This investigation isn't just about last night, Karen. It's about your entire record. The FBI has flagged multiple cases where your arrests were questionable. This could get very serious, very fast. Karen clenched her fists under the table. So what happens now? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The first FBI agent, the one with sharp eyes, spoke calmly. For now, you're being placed on temporary leave while we complete the investigation. Depending on what we find, there could be disciplinary action, or worse. Karen's stomach twisted. This is ridiculous. I was just doing my job, she snapped. The second agent raised an eyebrow. Was it your job to arrest an innocent woman without reason? Was it your job to ignore her rights? Karen looked away. She had no response. Chief Reynolds sighed. Turn in your badge and gun, Karen. His voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. Karen's heart pounded. She had been a police officer for years. Her badge was her identity, her protection. Without it, she was nothing. Slowly, with trembling hands, she unhooked her badge from her belt and placed it on the desk. Then she reached for her holster, took out her gun, and set it down beside the badge. The metal felt heavier than ever. The room stayed silent as the FBI agents gathered their files. The first agent stood up. You'll be notified of the next step soon. I suggest you start thinking about your actions, Officer Thompson. Karen said nothing. She felt anger, fear, and disbelief all at once. How had things spiraled out of control so fast? As the agents left the room, Chief Reynolds gave her a long, disappointed look. You should go home, Karen. Think about everything carefully. This department can't afford officers who abuse their power. Karen stood up, her legs feeling weak. Without a word, she walked out of the office, past the other officers who had been whispering about her. Some looked away, others watched with silent judgment. She stepped outside, the cold air hitting her face. For the first time in years, she wasn't a police officer. She wasn't in control. And worst of all, she knew this was just the beginning of her downfall. Karen walked to her car in a daze, her mind clouded with frustration and disbelief. Her whole world had changed in just a few hours. She had spent years in law enforcement, thinking she was untouchable, that she was in control. But now she had no badge, no authority, and no idea what would happen next. As she sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel tightly, her thoughts raced. This isn't fair, she muttered to herself. I was just doing my job. But deep inside, a small voice whispered the truth. This wasn't just about Maya Carter. This was about all the people Karen had treated unfairly, all the times she had acted without thinking, assuming she was right just because she wore a uniform. She took a deep breath and started the car. She needed to clear her head. Without her badge, she felt exposed. The city that once felt like hers now seemed different. The people walking by on the sidewalks weren't looking at her with respect or fear anymore. Now she was just another person. No special authority, no special power. As she drove, she found herself heading toward a quiet coffee shop, one she had passed many times but never entered. She parked and walked inside, her hands stuffed in her jacket pockets. She ordered a coffee and sat in a corner, staring out the window. A few minutes later, a familiar voice made her freeze. "Mind if I sit?" Karen turned her head slowly. Maya Carter stood there, holding a cup of coffee. Her expression was calm but serious. Karen hesitated, then nodded. "Go ahead." Maya sat across from her, placing her coffee on the table. "I wasn't expecting to see you here," she said. Karen scoffed. "Yeah, well, I didn't expect to lose my badge either." Maya took a sip of her coffee before responding. "Actions have consequences." Karen sighed, leaning back in her chair. "Look, I get it. I messed up. But I didn't mean any harm. I was just doing what I thought was right." Maya studied her for a moment. "That's the problem, Karen. You thought you were right without stopping to consider if you actually were." Karen frowned. "So what now? You got what you wanted. I'm off the force." Maya shook her head. "This was never about revenge, Karen. It's about accountability. People in power have to be responsible for their actions. If they aren't, innocent people suffer." Karen stared at her coffee, feeling something unfamiliar: guilt. She had spent years believing she was making the world safer, but now she wondered if she had done more harm than good. Maya stood up, grabbing her cup. "Think about what kind of person you want to be, Karen. Maybe this isn't the end for you. Maybe it's a chance to change." Karen watched as Maya walked out of the cafe. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't sure who she really was. Karen sat in the coffee shop long after Maya had left. Her mind was restless, replaying every word, every mistake, every moment that led to this day. She had always thought of herself as a strong officer, someone who upheld the law and kept order. But now, she wasn't sure anymore. Had she really been helping people, or had she just been using her badge as a shield to act without thinking? She took a deep breath and looked around the cafe. No one was looking at her. She was no longer Officer Thompson. She was just Karen, a person like anyone else. It was a strange feeling. Her phone buzzed on the table, breaking her thoughts. She picked it up and saw a message from an unknown number. "The investigation is still ongoing. You will be contacted soon." She sighed. This wasn't over yet. A part of her wanted to fight back, to prove that she wasn't a bad officer, that she had just made a mistake. But another part of her knew the truth. This wasn't just about one mistake. It was about a pattern she had ignored for too long. She glanced outside and saw a group of kids playing near the sidewalk, laughing and running without a care in the world. She thought about the people she had arrested in the past, the ones who had pleaded with her, saying they had done nothing wrong. Had she ignored them the same way she had ignored Maya? For the first time, Karen felt something deep inside her shift. She stood up, grabbed her coat, and walked out of the cafe. The cold air hit her face, but she welcomed it. She had a choice now. She could stay bitter, blame the system, and refuse to change. Or she could face the truth, learn from it, and become a better person. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear: this was not the end of her story. Maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something new.